Some people mistake kindness for weakness. They walk into your home, eat your food, sleep in your bed, and somewhere along the way, they forget whose house it actually is. My name is Margaret. I'm 63 years old, and for 11 months, I let my son's wife live under my roof rent-free, without a single complaint from me. I cooked for her. I cleaned up after her. I gave her space when she needed it and silence when she demanded it. And in the end, she looked me in the eye and told me I was lucky to have her there. That was the day I changed the locks. But to understand how we got there, you need to go back to the beginning. Back to when my beach house was still peaceful. Back before Amanda ever set foot on my porch with 3 suitcases and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I'd worked 32 years as a school administrator before I retired. My husband, Robert, passed 6 years ago, and after the grief settled into something I could carry, I sold our old house in the city and bought a modest place on the coast. 2 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, a view of the water that made every cup of coffee feel like a small miracle. It was mine. Quiet. Predictable. I gardened in the mornings, walked the shoreline in the evenings, and video called my son, Daniel, every Sunday. Daniel was 31, married 2 years to a woman named Amanda. I'd met her maybe 6 times before she moved in, polite dinners, careful smiles, the kind of surface-level warmth that never quite let you see what was underneath. I told myself I was being an overly cautious mother. I told myself to give her a chance. I had no idea how much chance I was about to give her. It was a Tuesday evening in early spring when Daniel called, his voice tight in a way I hadn't heard since he was a teenager hiding a bad report card. "Mom," he said, "we need a place to stay. Just for a little while." Our lease fell through. I didn't ask many questions. He was my son. Of course I said yes. 3 days later, a car pulled into my driveway and Amanda stepped out, not with 1 bag, not with 2, but 4 large suitcases and a garment rack still wrapped in plastic from the dry cleaner. "This place is so charming," she said, walking past me into the living room before I'd even finished saying hello. "It'll do. It'll do." I remember that phrase sitting strangely in my chest, like a splinter I couldn't quite locate. Daniel apologized quietly as he carried the last bag in. "It's just temporary, Mom. A month, maybe 2. It was not a month. It was not 2. Within the first week, small things started to shift. Amanda rearranged my kitchen cabinets for better flow. She moved my late husband's reading chair out to the garage because it clashed with the room. She left cabinet doors open, towels on the bathroom floor, and dishes stacked in the sink with a note. An actual note that read, "Can someone get to these? Thanks." I told myself she was adjusting. New environment, new dynamic. I gave her grace. But grace, I would learn, is not something everyone knows how to receive. Some people take an inch and measure it in miles. The night it truly shifted was 3 weeks in. I woke to a knock on my bedroom door at 4 in the morning. Amanda stood there in a silk robe, arms crossed. "I have an early flight for work," she said. "I need breakfast before I go. Something warm. Not cereal." I blinked at her, half asleep, certain I'd misheard. "You want me to cook for you? Right now?" "You're usually up early anyway," she said, as if that settled it, and turned and walked back to her room. I lay awake after that, staring at the ceiling, turning the moment over and over. It wasn't really about the eggs. It was about what the request assumed, that my time, my home, my role in my own house had quietly been redefined without my consent. I made the breakfast that morning. I told myself it was a one-time thing. It was not a one-time thing. Over the following months, the requests multiplied and hardened into expectations. Amanda began treating my home the way a guest treats a resort, someone else's job to maintain, someone else's obligation to serve. She had opinions about the thermostat, the grocery list, the guest towels versus the regular towels. She invited her friends over for weekend brunches I hadn't been told about, using my dishes, my patio furniture, my ocean view as a backdrop for her social media, never once asking, never once thanking me. When I gently mentioned that I'd appreciate a little notice before guests came, she laughed, an actual laugh, and said, "Margaret, It's not like you're using the space for anything important. Not important. My home. My life. Not important. I started noticing, too, how quiet Daniel had become. He used to be the one who filled a room with conversation. Now he mostly watched, said little, and left early for work even on days he didn't need to. Here I should tell you about Claire. Claire is my daughter, 28, who'd moved back to town for a nursing job around the same time Daniel and Amanda arrived. She didn't live with me, but she visited often, and I began to notice she visited less. When she did come by, she was different. Quieter. She'd glance at Amanda before speaking, choosing her words the way you choose your steps on ice. One evening, after Amanda had gone up to bed, Claire lingered at the kitchen table long after the dishes were done. She kept starting sentences and stopping them. "Mom," she finally said, "there's something going on." With Amanda. With Daniel. "I don't think it's what it looks like." I asked her what she meant. She shook her head, said she wasn't sure yet, and asked me not to say anything until she was certain. I didn't sleep well that night. The weeks that followed brought new depths of entitlement. Amanda began borrowing money from my purse, small amounts at first, 20 here, 40 there, always with a vague explanation after the fact, never an apology. She told me, without a hint of irony, that she thought I should consider putting the house in a trust for the family's future, meaning, unmistakably, hers. She suggested I might be more comfortable in a smaller place. My own beach house. The one I'd bought with money I'd earned across 3 decades of work. And then came the night she demanded I cancel my long-standing dinner plans with my old college friends because she'd invited coworkers over and needed the house presentable and calm. I sat in my car in the driveway that night, not going anywhere, just sitting, trying to understand how I had become a guest in my own home. Daniel, meanwhile, had lost weight. He flinched at raised voices. He'd started sleeping in the guest room some nights, telling me it was because of his early shifts. I asked him directly once if everything was all right between them. He gave me a tired smile and said, "We're just going through something, Mom. It'll pass." I wanted to believe him. But a mother knows the difference between a passing storm and a slow drowning. Claire came to me on a Sunday afternoon, and this time, she didn't hesitate. She told me she'd run into an old coworker of Amanda's, and in the course of casual conversation, learned something that made her blood run cold. Amanda wasn't on a work trip the week before. She'd been seen, repeatedly, with a man from her office dinners a weekend away, nothing hidden from anyone except the people it would hurt most. Claire had pieced together more after that. Amanda's sudden interest in the trust. Her comments about the house being sold. It wasn't a coincidence. She wasn't just disrespecting my home out of thoughtlessness. She was positioning herself. Testing how much she could take, how much control she could gain, before deciding whether the marriage and the access it gave her was even worth keeping. I confronted Daniel gently, giving him room to explain rather than accusing him outright. What came out surprised me even more. Daniel admitted, haltingly, that he'd known about the affair for weeks. He hadn't said anything, not out of loyalty to Amanda, but out of shame. He'd taken out a loan against joint savings to cover a bad investment months earlier, without telling her, and he was terrified that any confrontation would unravel everything at once, the affair, the debt, the truth about how unstable their finances actually were. He'd been using my house not just as free housing, but as a buffer, a place to avoid the reckoning waiting for him at home. And in staying silent, in choosing comfort over honesty, he let Amanda's disrespect toward me go completely unchecked for months, because confronting her about anything risked her walking away and taking the truth about the loan with her. I sat across from my son and realized that both the people living under my roof had been using it, and using me for their own separate, tangled reasons. Neither had thought to simply talk to me. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening, mundane in every way except for what was said. I'd asked Amanda, calmly, to please replace the groceries she'd used for her brunch the weekend before. Nothing dramatic, just a fair request. She turned to me, arms crossed, and said the words I will never forget. "Honestly, Margaret, you should be grateful we even stay here." Most people would kill to have young family energy in a house this lonely and outdated. You're lucky to have us. Lucky. Something in me went very quiet and very clear. Not angry, past angry. Certain. I didn't raise my voice. I simply said, I think it's time we all had an honest conversation. Tomorrow. All of us. The next evening, I sat Daniel, Amanda, and Claire down at my kitchen table, the same table Amanda had once called outdated. I laid it out plainly. I told Amanda I knew about the affair. I told Daniel I knew about the loan, and that his silence had cost all of us more than money. I told them both that the disrespect, the entitlement, the 11 months of being treated like staff in my own home, ended tonight. Amanda's composure cracked first into outrage, then into something closer to panic, as she realized the story she'd been controlling was no longer hers to control. She accused me of overreacting, of never liking her, of being an interfering mother-in-law. I let her finish. Then I said, quietly, this was never about liking you, Amanda. It was about respect. And you never once offered me any. Daniel said nothing for a long moment. Then, for the first time in months, he looked his wife directly in the eye and asked her, in front of all of us, whether the affair was true. She didn't deny it. The days that followed were not gentle. Daniel and Amanda's marriage, already hollowed out from the inside, collapsed the rest of the way within 2 weeks. Amanda moved out to stay with the coworker she'd been seeing, unbothered, it seemed, by how quickly her mask had come off. Daniel had a harder road. He had to face the loan on his own, own up to the financial mess he'd hidden, and sit with the fact that his silence, his willingness to let things slide rather than confront them, had cost him his marriage and nearly cost him his relationship with his mother and sister, too. I didn't shield him from the consequences. I loved him, but love and rescue are not the same thing. I told him he could stay while he rebuilt, but on my terms this time, with honesty as the price of admission. That week, I called a locksmith and had every lock on the house changed. Not out of spite, out of clarity. This was my home again, and anyone who stayed in it going forward would do so as a guest who understood exactly whose house it was. Claire, through all of it, had quietly grown into the steadiest person in the family. She'd been the one to see the truth first, to carry it carefully until it was time, to protect me without ever making the moment about herself. In the months after, she made a decision of her own. She'd been offered a nursing position in a coastal town 2 hours north, something she'd hesitated on before because she hadn't wanted to leave me alone in the house with so much unresolved. Now, with the air finally clear, she took it. I helped her pack the way she'd once quietly helped me survive that year. Standing in her doorway as she loaded her car, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, pride, uncomplicated and full. Daniel eventually moved into a small apartment of his own, rebuilt slowly, and started coming to Sunday dinners again, not as someone hiding from a mess, but as someone choosing to show up honestly. As for me, I sit on my porch most evenings now, coffee in hand, the ocean doing what it's always done, indifferent and steady. The house is quiet again. But it's a different kind of quiet than before, not the quiet of a woman waiting for her life to be interrupted, but the quiet of a woman who knows exactly where her boundaries are and isn't afraid to defend them. If there's one thing this year taught me, it's this. Kindness without boundaries isn't kindness at all. It's an invitation for people to take more than you ever meant to give. You can open your home, your time, and your heart to the people you love, but you never have to hand over your dignity to keep them there. I didn't change the locks because I stopped loving my son. I changed them because I remembered, finally, that I was allowed to love him and still protect myself. And that, in the end, made all the difference.